My husband thought he was a mastermind. He had a meticulous 18-month plan to serve me with divorce papers, use his status as a supportive spouse to claim half of the tech PR firm I built from nothing, and leave me financially and emotionally crippled. What he didn't know was that I found his playbook and I had a 2-week plan of my own. His plan ended with him screaming my name on our front lawn in police custody. Mine ended with me in our house alone, holding the keys to my company and my future. For 12 years, I thought our marriage was my anchor, the one constant in the chaotic world of tech startups and venture capital. Michael and I were a unit, a partnership. We were creating a life together in our beautiful modern farmhouse in the Texas Hill Country outside of Austin, a life financed entirely by the public relations agency I started on a folding table in my first apartment and grew into a powerhouse in the tech industry. I saw him as my co-pilot, my rock. But over the last year, that rock had started to feel like a millstone pulling me under. It began subtly with a change in the atmosphere. The comfortable silence we once shared during evenings on the patio became thick with unspoken things. His laptop, once left open on the kitchen counter, was now always angled away from me, snapped shut the moment I entered the room. He would laugh at a text, a private world I was no longer invited into. Phone calls would end abruptly with a hurried, "Got to run, I'll call you back," if my shadow fell across the doorway. My first instinct was to make excuses for him. He is in a slump, I told myself. It must be hard for him since his own startup failed 2 years ago and he decided to take a sabbatical to figure out his next move. I tried to be the understanding, supportive wife. I encouraged new hobbies, I planned weekend trips to San Antonio, I gave him the space he seemed to crave. But the more room I gave him, the more it felt like he was using it to build a wall between us. Soon the subtle shifts became deafening alarms. That is when he developed a sudden, intense interest in corporate finance. Michael had always treated my company, Momentum Media, like a magical ATM. He loved the benefits, the box seats at the Moody Center, the lavish dinners at Uchi, the impromptu trips to Cabo. But his eyes would glaze over if I ever discussed a new client pitch or our quarterly earnings. Now suddenly, he was acting like a junior analyst cramming for an exam. "Olivia," he would say, feigning casual curiosity as he looked up from his tablet. "That line of credit for Momentum, is that backed by personal assets or just business assets?" A few days later, I was just reading about Texas community property law. It is pretty fascinating. So, does the value of the house get split down the middle, even if the down payment came from that inheritance from your aunt? His questions grew more pointed, more specific. The intellectual property for the firm, like the client list and the brand itself, how is that valued in a dissolution of a partnership? I mentioned his newfound curiosity to a friend over coffee on South Congress. She brushed it off. "He is probably just feeling insecure and wants to understand your world better," she suggested. "Maybe he wants to contribute. That is a good thing, right?" But I knew Michael. This was not a desire to be more involved. This was reconnaissance. Each question was a pin being pushed into a map of my life, meticulously marking every asset, every vulnerability. A cold, heavy dread began to settle in my stomach. He was not planning for us. He was planning his exit strategy, and he intended to be very well compensated for his departure. The fantasy of our marriage came crashing down on a Tuesday afternoon. He was at the gym, and I needed to find a W-2 form on his laptop for our accountant. We shared the login. I was not snooping. I was not looking for trouble, but I did not have to. I opened his email client and the top email was sitting there like a venomous snake. The subject line hit me like a physical blow. Phase 2, financial leverage. I felt the air rush out of my body, my vision tunneled. With a trembling hand, I clicked it open. It was a long email chain with a notoriously shark-like divorce attorney in downtown Austin. They had been communicating for 3 months. They had outlined a strategy, a timeline. They had a plan to file a motion to freeze my business accounts the same day I was served, to paralyze me. They would argue that his unpaid emotional and domestic labor was a direct contribution to my success, entitling him to a massive portion of my company. The narrative they were crafting was nauseating. I was the cold, career-obsessed workaholic who had emotionally abandoned my sensitive, supportive husband. It was disgusting, but it was not the deepest cut. I navigated to his synced text messages and found the conversation that burned my world to the ground. It was with his college buddy, Mark. "She is completely oblivious," one of Michael's texts read. "So wrapped up in her next big client, she still thinks I hang the moon. It is almost tragic how much faith she has in me. The woman is a genius at making other people rich, but a total amateur at reading the person sleeping next to her." Mark replied, "Dude, are you sure you can get a piece of momentum? I thought that was all yours before you guys even tied the knot." Michael's answer made me physically ill. "My lawyer says it is a lock. We will call it spousal contribution. My support gave her the stable home environment to succeed. We will argue my sabbatical was really me managing the household so she could focus on work. By the time the papers hit her desk, she will be so blindsided and heartbroken she will not know which way is up. I am walking away with the house, half her liquid assets, and a permanent alimony check from the company she loves more than anything. She will be fighting just to make payroll." I had to grip the edge of the desk to keep from falling. The man I had shared a bed with for over a decade, the man I had financially supported for 2 years while he found himself, the man whose hand I held through his father's funeral, was talking about me like I was a mark, a hostile takeover target. Our life together was not a partnership, it was an investment he was about to cash out. He thought my love was a weakness. He thought my trust was a fatal design flaw. He was about to learn that the same relentless, strategic mind that built a multi-million-dollar company could also be used to utterly dismantle a traitor. That night, lying next to him in the dark, I listened to the even cadence of his breathing. The grief was a cavern in my chest, but a layer of glacial ice was already forming over it. If he wanted a war, he would get one, but I would not be fighting from a trench. I would be in the command center. The next morning, I told my staff I was taking a week for a strategic planning retreat, which was in a way the absolute truth. I did not call our friendly family lawyer. I did my research and booked a consultation with the most feared and respected family law attorney in the state, a woman named Eva Rostova. I walked into her steel and glass office overlooking Lady Bird Lake and laid out the whole ugly story, concluding with the screenshots from Michael's laptop, his signed and dated confession. Ms. Rostova, a woman with silver hair and eyes that miss nothing, listened with unnerving stillness. She did not offer a single word of comfort. When I was done, she offered something far better, a counter-offensive. "Olivia," she said, her voice precise and devoid of emotion, "your husband's plan is amateurish, but it relies on a powerful weapon, your shock and grief. He expects you to be an emotional wreck. We will deny him that. We are not going to break any laws. We are going to use the law with surgical precision to build an unbreachable fortress around your life's work, and we will have it finished before he even fires his first shot." For the next 10 days, my life became a blur of encrypted emails, notarized documents, and clandestine meetings. While Michael was at brunch with friends or playing golf, I was in Ms. Rostova's war room executing her plan. Following her exact instructions, we established a highly complex asset protection trust. I legally transferred 100% of my ownership of Momentum Media into it. It was a completely legal and standard practice for protecting a business from external threats. Since it was done before any divorce petition was filed, its legal standing was impeccable. My substantial personal savings, almost all of which were from my premarital earnings, were moved from any joint accounts into a new segregated account legally classified as my sole and separate property. Then we located our prenuptial agreement. It was a document Michael had laughed at when we signed it 12 years ago, calling it an unromantic formality we would never need. He had clearly forgotten its existence. Its language was unambiguous. My business, its future growth, and all its assets were designated as my separate property, untouchable in a divorce. His greed had made him sloppy. I was defending my legacy. I was drawing a line in the sand with concrete and rebar. When the time came, he would get his legal share of our marital assets, the equity in the house we had gained since we married, a portion of our joint checking account, and not a single penny more. 2 weeks to the day after I found the emails, he made his move. He staged it like a scene from a bad cable movie. He grilled steaks, our favorite, and opened a ridiculously expensive bottle of Cabernet. He sat me down at our large oak dining table. his face a mask of practiced sadness. "Olivia," he began, his voice thick with a counterfeit sorrow that was almost impressive. "This is the hardest thing I have ever had to do. I will always love you, but I am not in love with you anymore. I am lost. I need to find my own way. I think we need to get a divorce." He waited for the explosion. The tears, the pleading, the accusations, he was ready for it. I denied him his script. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I simply looked at him with a deep, quiet sadness that was 100% genuine, just not for the reason he thought. "I see, Michael," I said softly. "If you are not happy, then you are not happy. We cannot force that." A flash of confusion, of irritation crossed his features. This was not how the scene was supposed to play, but he recovered, misreading my calm as shattered resignation. He thought he was looking at a broken woman ready to be carved up. For the next week, as the initial paperwork flew between our lawyers, I let him believe it. I played the part of the heartbroken, shell-shocked wife. Then came the call, the one between his shark and my Ms. Rostova. It was meant to be the opening salvo of his shock and awe campaign. Instead, it was the moment his carefully constructed world was vaporized. I would have paid a fortune to be a fly on the wall when Michael got the follow-up call from his own lawyer. I can just imagine the panicked tone. "Michael, we have a catastrophic problem. Momentum Media. She does not own it. Not personally. It is locked in a Texas Asset Protection Trust and it is untouchable. The savings accounts you flagged, they have been legally segregated and proven to be premarital funds. The house, there is a new business lien against it tied to the trust, making it a complex liability we cannot just split. And Michael, she has the prenup. Her attorney faxed me a copy an hour ago, and they intend to enforce every last word." The future he had designed for himself, the sprawling hill country house, the endless income stream from my work, the triumphant victory over his foolish wife, it all went up in smoke. He was not facing a life of leisure funded by me. He was facing a life funded by his half of a few years of accumulated home equity and a savings account that suddenly looked very small. That is when the real Michael finally showed up. The mask of sorrow was gone, replaced by a desperate, frantic charm. Suddenly, divorce was the furthest thing from his mind. The texts and calls started, a syrupy, cloying flood of affection. He sent my favorite cupcakes to my office. He started texting me old photos of us from our honeymoon in Greece with captions like, "Remember how happy we were? We can be that happy again." One evening, he showed up at the downtown condo I had rented. His performance was breathtaking in its audacity. "I made a terrible mistake, Olivia," he sobbed, burying his face in his hands. "I was just so lost and insecure. I was angry about my own failures. It was never about the money, I swear. I was just lashing out. Please, can't we go to counseling? Can't we just try to fix this?" I looked at him, at the face I once cherished, now contorted into a pathetic caricature of remorse. "No, Michael," I said, my voice utterly flat, giving him none of the emotion he was trying to provoke. "You do not regret what you did. You only regret that it did not work." His face changed instantly. The mask melted away, revealing a raw, contemptuous snarl. The begging stopped. The accusations began. "You are hiding assets. That is illegal. You schemed behind my back, you liar." He was trying to flip the script, to paint himself as the victim. But it was too late. The board was set. The game was over. He had tried to checkmate a queen, not realizing she had already toppled his king. His next move was to poison the well. He began a systematic campaign to destroy my reputation among our friends. He spun a sob story of a man deeply wounded by a cold, calculating wife. In his version, I was the monster. I was the one who had been cheating. I was emotionally abusive, a tyrant who cared more about my company than my husband. The final brutal lie was that when he finally found the courage to leave, I maliciously drained our accounts and kicked him to the curb. He was convincing. He played the part of the sensitive, heartbroken victim so masterfully that for a short time it worked. Friends I had known for a decade grew distant. The dinner invitations dried up. One couple we were close to sent me a scathing email saying they were ashamed to have ever known me. The social isolation was a fresh, agonizing layer of pain on top of the betrayal. But Ms. Rostova had warned me. When a narcissist's primary strategy fails, she had said, they turn to reputational warfare. Let him exhaust himself. So I waited. I let his lies spread. Then I chose my moment. To a select group of our 10 closest mutual friends, I sent a single simple email. The subject line read, "For your consideration." Inside, there was no defense, no emotional plea. There were only 2 attachments: the screenshots of his text with Mark, where he called me a fool and detailed his plan to ruin me, and the PDF of the email chain with his lawyer, clearly dated 3 months before he ever asked for a divorce. The reversal was swift and total. The apologies flooded my inbox. "Olivia, I am so sorry. I cannot believe I fell for his act. He played all of us. We are here for you, whatever you need." His web of lies did not just unravel, it incinerated. The very people he tried to turn against me were now furious with him for his deception. Realizing he had lost his social army, he became unhinged. The desperation morphed into harassment. He started showing up at my office building downtown. At first, he would just sit in his car across the street. Then he started trying to corner me in the parking garage, his pleas turning into angry demands. My employees, who had only ever seen him as my charming, affable husband, now saw a man coming apart at the seams. Security had to ask him to leave twice. The 3rd time, he blocked my car with his and screamed at me through my window until security guards physically removed him. That stunt earned him a restraining order. The legal barrier only made him more reckless. He sent me dozens of emails, swinging wildly from tearful apologies to venomous threats. Then he played what he thought was his ace. I received a formal notice from the Internal Revenue Service. An anonymous tip had been filed accusing Momentum Media of large-scale tax evasion and alleging I had created illegal offshore accounts. It was him. I knew it instantly. Since he could not get my money in civil court, he was trying to use the full power of the federal government as his personal weapon. For a moment, a sliver of terror shot through me. Then I remembered the long, meticulous days in Ms. Rostova's office. Every transfer, every document, every single transaction had been vetted to be 100% legal and by the book. We had anticipated this exact pathetic move. The audit was brief. My legal and accounting teams provided the IRS with a mountain of documentation that not only proved our complete compliance, but also included a note from Ms. Rostova strongly suggesting the anonymous tip originated from a hostile party in an ongoing contentious divorce. The investigation was closed within weeks. Another one of his bombs had failed to detonate. That is when he finally hit rock bottom. His last stand came at 2 in the morning. My phone vibrated on the nightstand. It was my old neighbor from across the street. "Olivia," he said, his voice urgent. "You need to get over here. It is Michael. He is on your front porch trying to pry the door open. He is screaming your name. The police are on their way." I had changed the locks weeks ago, but in his delusional, desperate state, he must have thought he could physically force his way back into the life he had so casually planned to burn down. I drove over, a strange mix of rage and hollow pity churning in my gut. When I arrived, the street was bathed in the flashing red and blue lights of 2 squad cars, and there, illuminated on my perfectly manicured lawn, was Michael. He was a complete wreck, disheveled, face swollen and stained with tears, shrieking at a police officer about how I had stolen his life, his home, his money. I walked up to the senior officer and calmly introduced myself. He looked from me to the raving man on my lawn and back again, a look of slow comprehension dawning on his face. I explained the situation, the ongoing divorce, and the restraining order he was currently violating. They asked me if I wanted to press charges. I looked at Michael, this sputtering, collapsed shell of a man, all his cunning and arrogance stripped away, leaving only this pathetic public spectacle. "No," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I do not. But please make it clear to him that this is the absolute end. There are no more chances." That was it. the real end. For him and for us, seeing him there, utterly devoid of power and dignity, was the final punctuation. He finally understood, with a certainty that even he could not deny, that he had lost. The divorce was finalized shortly after. He walked away with what the prenup gave him, a meager sum that was barely enough to start over. The last I heard, he had moved back to Ohio to live with his parents. The life of easy luxury he was so certain he had earned had vanished into thin air. It took me a long time to heal, a betrayal that deep leaves a scar on the soul. But I did heal. My company flourished. My real friends formed a protective circle around me, and in the quiet evenings in my house, a house that was now entirely, indisputably mine, I found a peace I had not realized I had been missing for years. He had tried to burn my world down to get what he wanted, but in the end, the only life he managed to completely destroy was his own.